Alright, thank you for joining me in part 2. We were cut off at the end there, right before we were about to start doing some major formatting. It's all okay, but we're going to continue on now. So, major formatting part 2. I'm going to do a green background. Do white text. Bold it. Increase the size ever so slightly, and we'll center it for good looks. Of course, it's a good idea to merge all those cells, merge and center, and moving on to the next step. Now this part, again, you don't necessarily have to watch all of it, but it's not the worst part, and it probably shouldn't take too long. It's a lot of merging, centering, and bolding. If you're having trouble recognizing what I'm doing, then it might not be a bad idea to just follow along. Merging, centering, bolding, text coloring. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that for a lot of this part. And you know, at this point you're probably thinking, wow, can you get much more repetitive? And I'll say, I could. But in order to save us all some time, I'm going to show you a handy tool called the Format Painter. It's quite lovely, and it'll save all sorts of time. You might have to hit the merge and center and re-merge and center it, but you know, it's again a pretty cool tool. And I'm even going to go ahead and throw in some thick borders, and I'm going to go ahead and format paint that again. Select Format Painter and do that for property data. I'm actually going to do it to the loan and equity calculations as well, and to the property information, because you can see it's going to just add the borders for me versus me having to just select it. It's really not a big deal. I'm just doing it that way just to show whole process can be done repetitively, save you some time. Now, one risk I've come across is, you can see here, one possible mistake. So I'm going to undo that, make sure that the loan information part at the very least looked okay, and undo that. I'm going to go ahead and select a new format paint off of this, and this is just going to help because it's going to go and make everything for these major titles exactly what I was hoping for. Yeah, that's one thing about working with Excel. Occasionally have a little bit of a mishap or something of that nature, and they're not really a big deal, you know, it's just something that takes you a little bit of extra time sometimes. You got to make sure you don't get frustrated, just keep doing it, keep going through, working through it all. Yeah. So yeah, the more formatting you do, typically the more you're gonna really be able to enjoy the clean look and professional look of your work, but it does take time. And one thing I can say from doing this, you can see how I kept dragging it. That kind of helps to go and get a really good idea. But if you just click on it, if you have the same size, you can actually just click one and done. And that saves a little bit of time. Of course, doing that right from the beginning would have been helpful, but now if I get to the end here and I want to make it go a little bit further, you can see the issue comes in where I have this bolded line here, and that's just not going to work. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm just going to go ahead and start formatting this manually. And it's not a big deal, but you know, it's something to be considered, something to take into account. Yeah. Yeah. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my main bolded border so that if I printed this off, and even when I'm working with it, it just does seem to have a little bit of a nicer, solid, thick border. Tells me exactly where the sheet is, what it is I'm going to be working with. And if you want, you can actually choose to make that a little bit thicker. Just do more borders option. And there are numerous ways to do this, but if you choose to choose a thicker line like this, you do an outline after having selected this thicker border, you'll get a little bit of a thicker outline. And that can just be nice because you're going to go ahead and get a really nice, thick, solid look to that one particular part. I'm going to go ahead and do another thick box border here. Yeah, always good to know how to use your undo. I believe Control Z might be another way. If you hover, yes, Control Z, it'll just undo pretty much anything. There are a few things that are exceptions. They're very far, few in between, and they can be obscure, so I won't go into them necessarily right here, but keep in mind, a lot of times if you do see that come up, it's not something to be taken too lightly. You want to make sure that you do heed the warning. And here I'm going to show you a very simple underline border, or just a border on the bottom, and there you go. Get a really nice, relatively thin line, but you don't need a whole lot for that. And I'm just going to go ahead and right now auto center these. It really does make it easier to read a lot of times. Now, one downside is being unable to easily see what's being done, but besides that, it's not too bad. You can see the loan to value amount, and this 1 and 2 is separated quite far from the other one, but it's not really that big of a deal if you really do get irked by it. Of course, I left 2 cells here, so conveniently I can shrink that a little bit, and it really is not going to affect a whole lot, and it will make it look a little more uniform, but it's nice to just do that single auto center, and you just highlight whatever you want and you just double click it at the top. Auto centers it for you. It's pretty convenient. I recommend it. So, moving on, finishing the rest of this. And I'm just going to add these bottom borders here, make life a little bit easier. If you try going too far ahead, sometimes you find yourself wondering what step you're actually working on, so it's always a good idea to make sure you know what you're doing. And occasionally you find yourself having made a little bit of a miss, such as I did there. Not a huge deal to fix, but good to do. Needed to be done. That's why some things are good to capitalize, just so you know exactly what it is that needs to be done. Now, those bottom borders give you an idea of why it is that you're doing something a lot of times. For example, if you're not 100% sure what's the next line, you know that after that bottom border is typically some sort of sum or subtraction or multiplication. It's just some sort of total. And it gives you an idea that it's something important.